In the DAW with Sci-Fi. Looking at Ecotone out on Gravitas, link below, but let's go in the DAW.
I started off by taking a loop, 16 bar, very long melodic loop. And I think it was basically just like a sample that had some chords. And what I did was with Ableton, you can do that feature where you send audio to MIDI, where you can like extract the harmony from the audio. So I did that and then found the chords. There was a bunch of chords there that allowed me to kind of use as the construction kit for the whole track. So with this one, it ended up starting out with a melody. Some tracks start with drums, but with this one, it started with a solid melodic piece, which is actually the intro.
You had a melodic piece and then you extracted the MIDI from that and put your own synth on it?
I can show you it right now. It's the OG. And so everything within the track is actually like either a chord or a piece of melodic content from that. And from there, I just went the first chord. I just basically started extracting the chords and then creating phrases out of those chords.
For those who don't know how to extract the MIDI, can you just really quickly show us how you did that?
Just right click on the piece of audio that you're trying to extract the MIDI from. It's an awesome feature that in Ableton 9. So then you're given oftentimes the wrong information. It just spits out a bunch of notes like this. And then you're kind of forced to go in there and figure out, because it doesn't do a really accurate job, but you can start to be like, okay, that's a chord, that's a chord, there's a chord too. It's probably kind of like a backwards sort of way to do it, but I'm not classically trained with writing piano. I did classical guitar when I was a kid. So I have an idea of like how things are supposed to sound, but I'm not skilled at putting chords into the keyboard. So this is a great feature that allows me to kind of extract those chords without actually knowing what I'm doing in a way.
I've actually found quite a bit of success doing this, but doing it in the wrong way. So for example, there's a song, it's by A Day to Remember. It's called Have Faith in Me. And I wanted to get the MIDI off of it. But what happened was, so I did this, so I extracted the harmony from it and it gave me something completely different that had nothing to do. Basically, like it didn't sound like the song at all, but it sounded beautiful. And so it's like a really cool little trick. You can pull in one of your favorite songs, press extract harmony, and something else may come out of it that you didn't expect. And you're like,
brand new original idea. And you're not taking that same idea from the other track too.
Did you almost do arpeggios from those chords sometimes?
Just take all those chords from before that we were extracting out of this piece, and then figure out like all the notes of the chords and then basically create an arpeggio from that chord. So if we turn these into full chords, we can do it that way and then throw the Ableton arpeggio on it. But I spend way too much time creating little arpeggios that sometimes don't go anywhere, but they're just really emotionally satisfying. A lot of the time that's done with trial and error process of taking these notes and then going like, you know, and then pushing it up an octave by hitting shift up, and then like shift up, shift down, until we've like found something. And also I'll just go through like the entire melodic piece here, like all these chords, and just do this over and over again until I've created something. It's just this painstaking process kind of.
And so you would rather do it like this than do it with the arpeggio?
Okay. Yeah, because it's a little more exact, and then I can find these parts where it's like I could find a part where I could kind of go outside of the arpeggio. You know, like that note wouldn't have been in the arpeggio if I had had a full note there. I can start pushing notes around. I use the arpeggios basically just for like emotional melodic content. A lot of the times I need to kind of soothe it into place instead of having it be a spat out of a Ableton machine.
So on this instrument that we got going on right here, beautiful instrument, what kind of sound design are we looking at?
This is Spire. I love using Spire for these like kind of trance pluck sort of sounds. I just took the Anjuna pluck preset. It's nothing really special. And then automating filter on, so automating the filters with Inspire. And then some reverb. So I like to have reverb at the end of the phrases to be able to build some suspense. It's like kind of like a riser without actually putting in a riser, when you can just automate the reverb at the end of a phrase. And same with the filter. It also kind of has like this like an LFO pitch modulation, sounds like too. But the nice thing about these plucks is you can just open up the pluck. That's what this is doing. So by opening up that pluck, you make it kind of more into a pad, which would be helpful for the big drops.
Is that the filter cutoff, not the envelope you're automating by the list of things?
Correct. Yeah, the filter cutoff, low pass right there, and then a high pass. So by automating the low pass and the high pass, you can kind of create like builds and always having movement, especially with these long pieces where you're dealing with like maybe 32 bars or 16 bars of extended melodic information. I think it's really important to always have movement in that sound, or else it can sound very stale. Like when I first started writing music, I would want to have these really long melodic pieces, and it didn't feel very natural. I found that the more automating and the more reverb and the more, so the sound is always changing, it makes the sound more interesting for an extended period of time.
How did you approach the arrangement to this? Did you kind of do what most people do, like intro, build up, drop, and then almost duplicate, or did it come together more naturally than that?
With the arrangement, with this album, each intro to each track was very important how it was made, since it was a continuous album. It was really important to have a beginning to the song that was ambient and kind of just airy, because I was taking the very last part of the last song, which was Cerebro in this album. So I would put reverb on the end of that track to create a very long tail. And then I would have that tail go into this track. So the beginning is actually the last part of the last track on the album, which is this part. And this kind of, it just creates a fade. I took the reverb from the last track, threw it onto here to kind of glue it all together. And then a lot of my tracks, I'll have this drum intro. I listen to a lot of tunes these days, and they don't necessarily have a lot of drum intros. It's just build up and to drop, which is easier to mix as a DJ. But I wanted to be able to introduce the idea before the drop a little bit better. You know, it's basically just introducing ideas. We can introduce those chords, and then when the build-up, continuing that melody from the melody we were introducing here. So I grew up, I was in punk bands, and I come from a kind of more musical instrument background, where I was in like kind of like crust punk bands and hardcore, and I just played my guitar super loud and listened to like these more emo punk songs when I was a kid. And a lot of those songs have this structure of arrangement where it's an intro, a verse, chorus, and then there's also a bridge. It's kind of like a weird thing to have a bridge in an electronic music track, but I feel a lot of my tracks have that similar structure from when I was doing band music. That's where this final buildup and this whole into like kind of like a final drop that tells a story in a way. Sometimes it can sound a little out of place when I'm introducing a new idea at the very end of the track. That's kind of just what I like to do. You know, I like to create a journey within the song. And sometimes that includes bringing in a whole new third drop that goes and finishes the track out that way. You know, I'm trying to get better at not being so loop based and having ends to phrases. So it'll be like pretty steady drop. We'll have like an exit to the drop right there where we can go in something new. Another part to the arrangement process is here we have, I think this is 16 bars, and then here we have 8 bars, and then the build. And if I was to continue that for another 8 bars, that sound would get stale. So I don't ever really want to have 16 bars and then another 16 bars of the same thing. I'd prefer it to be 16, 8, and then the build feels like the last 16 bars.
In the, I guess you would call it like the first verse, I guess you'd say like the section before the build, right at the very, very first where the drums come in. I feel like those drums just smack so hard, just hit me in the face. Why do they do that?
On my kick here, I'm using Voxengo. Dude, this LF Max Punch is awesome. You can basically put a sub note underneath your kick, at least to the best of my understanding. I first started using this because I saw 7 Lions hyping it up. And I was like, okay, if 7 Lions is into it, I'm going to try it out. I can A/B it with and without. Like with the sub, you can hear that there's a little bit of sub information. And I like to have it hit at about 100 hertz for the low frequency gain, because I feel like that's a really good, like punchy kind of sound. And the sub hits a lot lower than that. That is a really big part of why that drum smacks so much. Another reason why I think these drums hit, it might not sound like it would help the drums, but the sub also, I feel, helps the drums in a way. And I got to thank Symbionic for helping me out with that. Nice. Because when I was going back and forth with him on releasing this, the sub it's a D. And I don't know if you've tried to like mix D, but it's a really low frequency, especially the like low D sub frequency. So it's really important to have like another layer. So that's why there's a top sub as well as the like a bottom sub. Voxengo on the kick, and then for the snare, I think I already bounced this down. But we've got a snare hi-hat kind of with it. One thing I really like to do these days, man, if you want to make your drums like punchy, I will go in and delay that snare like 3 or 4 milliseconds. And you hear that it like has a little bit of snare before it, a little bit of hi-hat before the snare. And that way it actually makes it sound like it's thicker. So dude, I've been doing this on all my kicks, all the snares, on most tracks where I'm trying to get that really thick drum sound. I will put a hi-hat like 4 milliseconds before the sound is actually going to hit. It makes it just like widen out and stuff.
I'm really proud of you for using the track delay. I never see anyone ever using the track delay. It's such an underused feature for those who don't know. So over on the little side right there, you can turn it on, you can turn it off. But basically, you can put something wherever you want on the grid and then delay it either forward or backward a certain amount of milliseconds, which is super cool. So that way you don't necessarily have to go in and move the audio waveform or the MIDI waveform for that matter to one side or the other. You can go over here and just click on it and just move it like that. That's so cool, man.
I think a lot of people need to do it more because so much music is so like on grid. And when you have like a snare, like a couple layers of that snare, as well as a cymbal crash and maybe even some percussive stuff, when that all hits at the same time, like you don't hear all those elements kind of like mixed well. It's not glued together really well. So when you can kind of articulate it better with the track delay, it's huge. But I don't know if it was Mr. Bill or Deadmau5 who was talking about this, but they don't like to use the track delay. It could have been, it was probably Deadmau5 because he doesn't like anything. But okay, look, I was already actually doing it a little bit here. There was probably a reason why I didn't want to. Yeah, that track delay, this is what he was saying, is when you're dealing with outboard gear and recording it into Ableton, that track delay can be really helpful with latency. So I think that was one of the original uses for it. Man, I use everything in the box, so I feel kind of ignorant when it comes to like all that fancy outboard gear and stuff. So I might not really know what I'm talking about.
So that Voxengo plugin, is that free or does that cost something?
It's part of a whole package that I got a while ago. But there's a lot of great plugins in there too. There's one called Gliss, but it's a fantastic plugin as well. And I first got into it because I didn't have the Fab Filter stuff at that time.
That's a really good trick. I've never even heard of, because the only Voxengo thing that I heard of is like the mid-side. They have like a free mid-side something or another. That's really, really cool. This kick punch, dude, this is gold.
You can go really overboard with it though. It's easy to get too carried away with it. A lot of the times I'll just load it on there. So I'll activate the LF part here and then just like a tiny little bit of gain. Sometimes don't even need to put any on, and it being there adds a little bit, like that subtle amount. Yeah, it's pretty awesome. And then I'll EQ after that. Somewhere around 60 hertz, I'll usually shelve it to prevent any of the really low stuff from coming through.
So just a small minor thing, but something that I think is really good that I don't see enough people do. So am I right in saying for your kicks, you set different gains on the different clips there?
Absolutely. I like to, for instance, this kick is more of a support kick for this one. If that was a full power kick, it would distract from the kick that was about to occur. And I feel like having that with all sorts of sounds is really, really important and can provide a more natural sort of feel for what you're trying to do. Especially further down the line here, like where this kick is actually just supporting the sub, because I wanted the kick to, like a kick element to hit when the sub was hitting, because I feel like when you attach a piece of like heavy percussion to the sub, it makes the sub more impactful and your ear can kind of hear that as a sub more. And considering this low sub was kind of hard to come through, I needed all the help I could get.
How are you mixing your kick with the sub, using sidechain compression or just EQ?
So nowadays I'll create a whole MIDI track and then have just a little tiny click and then sidechain from that click, because it's a little more accurate. I can find out how many milliseconds, like a 16th note releases. And then I will, like at 143 BPM, like how many milliseconds a 16th note release is going to be. And then I could just input that into the release of the sub. And that way it's like triggering on that 16th note. So I was doing the same thing here. I think 105 milliseconds is 16th note release at 143. And there's all sorts of calculators you can get online where you just type in the BPM and then it'll show you all the delay times for different notes. So with this, it's just basic sidechain, super high ratio, and just releasing at 105. And that, I think, kind of corresponds to what this kick wanted. For other sidechain, I'll use kind of this interesting roundabout way. The melody section, I was actually sidechaining from this external instrument at a certain part. So this will send MIDI information to an LFO tool on my melodies section. And so anytime that MIDI information is sent from here to here, LFO tool will engage. And this is a tool created by the same people that bring Serum. Between that and just basic sidechaining, that's how I sidechain.
And is that sidechain to the snare as well? Do I see that?
Yes, we have the main kick, the build kick, and then the snare.
I feel like you doing that's actually a really nice finesse to it, because too often I see one sidechain for anything, for the normal kick, for the snare, for the build kick, so on and so forth. Maybe in some instances that might be okay, but I find it more often than not that it's more harmful than it is good, because not one shoe fits all.
Exactly.
So around 1 minute and 55 seconds, you have this really cool pulsating bass sound, or bass synth that you got going on. That's it right there.
I made it in Serum, and then I do so much freezing and flattening. I'll just make the sound and then flatten it out. I want to be able to chop it up in MIDI, and so by the time it hits this point, it's probably been freeze and flattened a couple times. If you just heard this sound on its own, I feel like it wouldn't be that impactful, but the sound of this with like the drums, you kind of correlate whatever is going on with the drum programming to whatever's going on with this bass line to kind of make it mesh up, at least like the cymbals and whatnot. But yeah, this is a sound in Serum. This combined with that bunch of reverb, pretty sure it's like a square wave mixed with some lots of multiband.
And I can't remember which channel that you were just on, but I just saw a channel that had the plugin Side Widener, and I've actually never seen that before. What is that?
Oh yeah, I definitely used it on here. Side Widener is a free plugin. you can kind of see a visual representation of the image. A lot of the times I'll actually back off on the width a little bit. That's with it. You kind of hear how it kind of widens everything out. I love it. I put it on almost all the melodic stuff, but at the same time, like I'm a firm believer that you don't want everything to be wide, because then if everything is wide, then nothing is wide.
Am I right in hearing, and also I think I might have seen it as well, you automating the pan?
Absolutely. So it's this part, this is kind of the, yeah, the panning in this track is really important because I feel like a lot of these melodies need to sweep from speaker to speaker. So I'll do kind of these dramatic pans in this section here. There's some other parts that are panned as well. Oh yeah, this part right here. It's kind of like chaotically wild panning, especially at the end of the phrase right here. So the sound goes like it's a vocal that just kind of shifts from speaker to speaker. And this happens at the end of some of the phrases.
It's one of those techniques I think we almost forget about once we learn some of the more fancier techniques that you can just literally automate the pan sometimes.
Yeah, whereas I mean I guess you could do it with an auto pan, but sometimes just drawing it in yourself, it's a little more precise.
In this particular project, what did you find most difficult?
Mixing. It's really hard with this one, especially with the subs, because like I mentioned earlier, it having more low like root notes. Like the first time I played this track out, it was on this like really nice Danley sound system, and it hit really, really well. But then I looked up the specs of the sound system, and the frequency response was really, really low. So then I played this at a nightclub, and it sounded like all the bass was missing. You know, I played it on one of those more like house sound systems, and all the bass was missing. So I kind of had to find a way to make that D note, to make it sound a lot heavier, and especially with the intro here. One of the things that I did to compensate by adding some like really interesting percussion that kind of grabbed your ear more than the bass for the intro. And I even I made these, or I didn't make them, but I kind of, by reversing some samples, I made these sounds that kind of sounded like swords hitting that would come right before the snares. It kind of like created these like kind of whooshes around the snares that I thought really sounded good. I'd say the bass was one of the hardest parts, and it's not normally the hardest part. Usually it's pretty kind of self-explanatory. You just kind of copy the bass line and make a sub, but with this one, it wasn't as easy. And I had to end up saturating the top layer of duplicating the bass, turning it up an octave, saturating that, and then cutting out all the low information to kind of create like a warm top layer of the sub. But once I did that, I felt like the track was pretty solid.
So just out of curiosity with that, if you could go back and put it into a different key, what key would have been more sub-friendly?
I'd say G sharp or F. F is a lot more sub-friendly. Like on big sound systems, F and G just hit really, really nice. And nowadays, like I try to keep that in mind when I'm starting a new song. What notes am I going to have to kind of work with here that will allow for like really good sub response?
If you woke up tomorrow and everyone forgot about this track and you wanted to re-release it, would there be anything different that you would want to change on it before releasing it again?
There wouldn't be. There really wouldn't be. With the whole totality project, I spent so much time gluing all the tracks together, and then I think I spent too much time on it, and I think I overcooked it. I would try to spend less time. Like if I had to redo this track, I would do it a little bit more concise, like attack strategy, and I would try to get it done quicker, because it took a long time. I don't want to spend that much time on it.
Would you like our feedback on your song?
Yeah, I would love feedback.
So the first thing that came to my mind is you gave me anxiety by you going through all of your plugins looking for them. So just remember, you can press Command F and type in the plugin that you want, and it'll pop up.
Command
Yep.
O.
And it goes to the search bar, and now you can type in whatever you want. You can type in Serum, you can type in whatever, and it'll just pop up.
Oh, wow.
So like with the Vox Angle stuff, with Serum, with Side Widener, whatever you want, you can just type it in, make it a lot faster.
Thanks. You just saved me all that time. I just said how it took too much time doing all that other stuff. There's probably a million things just like that I could be doing to...
The other thing that I was thinking about, this isn't necessarily feedback, but it's more so like a cool trick that I've been thinking about. And so when you were talking about not only the stereo widening tricks that you were doing, but also the panning, right now, the most that I've seen, I mean, there's been some times where I've seen people do really, really cool stereo tricks. I have this image in my head, and I'm trying to figure out how to do it, where it's like, if if you had a watermelon and you sliced it in half and then moved them like this, you know, so no, they're not going like this and they're not going like this, but they're going like this, right? I have an image like that of like, how would you do that with audio? How would you get it? Because right now, yeah, we can make sound go like this and like this and like this and like this. But how would you make it go like this? You know, like how would you make it like, basically, if someone came and just took your song and sliced it with the samurai sword and made it basically like slice in two different directions, how would you do that?
The Fruit Ninja.
Yeah, exactly, just like the Fruit Ninja. And so the way that I've been thinking about it is basically what you would have to do is, yes, kind of set up some type of instrument rack that, yes, it separated the sound to make it wide, but then on the one side would simultaneously cut out all the lows, and on the other side simultaneously cut out all the highs. So basically it felt like it was going like this while simultaneously going like this. And if you wanted to, you could add depth to it as well. But I just feel like that'd be super cool. You know, like all of a sudden, you know, like maybe it's coming towards like, it's like the snare right before the turnaround, right before the downbeat again. And you slice your track and it just goes like that and then comes right back in. And
That's
then
really cool.
So try that out. I think that'd be kind of cool if you figure out how to do that.
I will. Yeah. I think that you're onto a good point with like changing the highs and lows to try to like trick the ear, because that's what you're trying to do there. Just trying to like trick the ear by moving things around a little bit.
And if anyone else is watching this and you know how to basically, the reason why I said, you know, adjusting the frequencies as well is because when I think of frequencies, that's where I think of height. So the high frequencies are high, the low frequencies are low. And so we want the sound to go one direction, we want it to go high, and we want the other direction to go low. So if anyone else has any idea of how to make the sound go like that, to make it perceived to be going up and down, let us know. That would be awesome.
You could make an Ableton rack, and then we could call it like the Fruit Ninja bass rack.
You know, the actual feedback to your track, I thought it was so cool. The first reaction that I had to your track was through the AU5 remix. The fact that AU5 was remixing your song is huge.
He's so enviably good at what he does. I was pretty stoked to have him on board.
Seriously. And so once I heard the remix and then heard the original, I was just like, oh my gosh, like this is such an amazing song. Man, and this is such a creative opinion. So take it with a grain of salt. So if you don't feel the same way, don't apply it at all. But it's more so just like, I felt like it took a little bit long for me to get into the track. That the payoff of like understanding the track didn't come for a little bit longer than what I'm used to. Now, whether you like that or not, that's up to you.
That's a great point. I actually agree. I think like, especially when I was playing this track out, I kept wanting it to just drop sooner, because I'd be like sitting there like, okay, this is cool. Everyone wants to dance right now. Like, just drop already.
Yeah.
And like, so I even kind of got that sort of reaction like from the live format.
Gotcha. That's really good to know. And then also, again, this is just a creative opinion. I kind of felt like I wasn't entirely sure where the track was going, you know, as far as like structurally, because what we were talking about earlier, I'm used to intro, verse-ish thing, build, drop, so on and so forth. But at the same time, that was actually something that I liked about it too, is because it was a journey. I didn't really know what to expect. And so I know that's contradictory advice of saying make it more easy to chew, but don't make it easier to chew at the same time. It's super weird. So go with what you feel on that. You know, like if you love the way that the structure is and how it's just kind of like unique, then high five.
No, that's a good point, man. Like that's something that I feel like I kind of struggle with writing music, is having an idea for the track and then letting kind of myself get distracted while I'm writing the track, and then like having it go in this kind of weird direction that I wouldn't have thought that it would go. But for some reason, it's like just satisfying when I'm making it. I just kind of go with it, but I agree.
What sort of genre would you call this track, or do you not really consider it to be a track with a genre?
I'd consider it dubstep, but it's more like cinematic dubstep, if that could be considered a genre. A lot of my inspiration and sounds, and it all comes from science fiction movies, and the themes to like all of my favorite science fiction films that have these really epic drum sequences with taiko drums and like all this like loud percussion. And so it's I'd consider it like cinematic dubstep. Thanks a lot.
Awesome.
I appreciate you having me on. It's good to meet you guys.